No, by and large, they should be given the benefit of the doubt. But the issue is today that the national treasure, despite what anybody says, is going to have to be watched closely to get this economic security of ours to what can afford the best from health to defense in the future. So we should be watching more closely. And so as Secretary Gates came out, and I'll end with this, I have 2 plants in my district that support the F-22. But you run through the scenarios, and 187 is far more than sufficient. And CSAR was to be built in my district, which he's canceled. But you know, he's right. We need a joint capability. We don't need a single service capability for that. Congress is as culpable as anyone of not being able to help change what I believe, and I could be wrong, a different type of benchmark for measuring our prowess in the future. Try to go in any one of our committees and find anybody who's the single belly button for cyberspace. Can't find it. So I commend the Navy to where it is today, but I would believe that you'll still have a great Navy if we remain as we are. But we'll have, I believe, a much more cost-efficient and greater capability in our Navy and the other services. If there is a judicious ability to say maybe we need to switch a bit more to measuring ourselves what we are, recognizing that there are Congress members, defense interests that are not just on force posture, or posture, but structure and industry that may have different viewpoints. With that, I'll stop. I hope I haven't bored you. It's nice to be back, and I'd be happy if I haven't to answer any questions. Is that all right? Thank you. Yes, sir.
John Doyle, Aviation Week. Do you think there is a need for a separate cyber force, like
Yes.
a separate Air Force?
Here's what I believe, and I was on the Congressional Roles and Missions Commission study last year, and I wrote 2 papers, one essentially of what I just spoke about, and the other to answer your question. So I don't think that we should never do another Roles and Missions Commission again. We have studied this thing since, you know, the Newport Conference, or where was it, down Florida? Key West, thank you, Key West doctrine. You can tell I'm paying more attention to health care. It's an issue. We need to see, rather, not what differentiates the services, but what's common among the services. The Navy's got the commons of the seas. The Air Force, let's just give them the commons of the air. The Navy does dominate where they need to be in certain places. But the commons of cyberspace is what all of them share. Let's emphasize the sharing, not the differentiation. And what I believe is there's 3 types of incentives in the military, in the Defense Department. The first is patriotism. There isn't a man or woman in uniform that wouldn't die for this nation. The second, understandably, is promotion. Not in an egotistical way, but everybody wants to provide for their family with a better quality home and all. Well, we fixed that in the joint world by saying, Goldwater Nichols, you don't get promoted unless you go joint. How does Congress work best? By incentivizing, not by mandating. We got a mighty joint operational force. But the third great incentive is who owns the money. You can say what you want about all these coordination and putting some lead agency in charge, but in the dark of the night, when that budget is being completed, who owns that final dollar has the greatest incentive, and so to speak, to place it where he or she wants. So if you really want to have a common effort into controlling cyberspace, you need to remove the money for cyberspace from the services and give it to the joint staff. And the reason is, at the end of the day, the services has, as this conference may show, say, I think, if you believe that cyberspace is this important, and I do, I want to know those 47 platforms more than pickling 1,000 of them. I want the 47 of them. And if you believe that, then you need to take the monies to bring that about here, because at the end of the day, the service will understandably give it to one more hull over that capability. That's my belief. And there has been studies on this by the Joint Staff. That was one of 3 proposals my last year that they had there. It was the most radical. And my mind is that you take, if you want the guy on the ground who can blink on through special binoculars, seeing some target over the hill that goes to a satellite, down to the warhead of a Tomahawk missile, and voom, it goes. You want that link brought together at one hole, not just where the F-18 can't talk to the other, to the Air Force's JSF. If you want that brought, you need to move the money. Second, there should be a change to JROC. I had 4 amendments in this acquisition bill. Matter of fact, I'm supposed to be over at the White House right now for the signing. But Hudson is more important, sir. And I had this commitment, so I kept 2 out because one of them I felt was too much, and the others got in. It's where I think the JROC has to become like the Joint Chiefs of Staff. When the Goldwater-Nichols was signed, and Admiral, the wonderful Admiral Crow was chairman at the time. When he walked into the tank, right after it was signed by the President, for the first time, the rest of the Joint Chiefs of Staff stood up. He was now first. No longer one of many equals. The JROC needs to do the same. It's a committee, and committees trade off. And if you need a defining person to have, and the chairman is in charge of that, to decide on that. And so I think that's a mechanism. But I believe the incentive that is best moved is to if you want to get to the cyberspace, it's not a command. I mean, you can get all you want on the requirements and all that. That's what the JROC does. The incentive is who has the money. There's only those 3 incentives: patriotism, motion, and who owns the money. And Ike Skelton and others did well with the promotion, and we got it good. And I believe that's how we should incentivize it. Yes, sir.
Congressman, I appreciate and enjoy the broader vision, but given the theme here today, could you give us some thoughts just informally, off the cuff, about the shape of the fleet?
Sure. The analysis that I watched go through modeling and things like that said we could live well if you bought cyberspace with around 240 ships. The number that came across ended up being 260 just for some political reason. Yeah, I would. You can live well if you posture the ships. You remove to Guam and other places with about 9 carriers. 10 would be nice, but you could live with 9. Again, I'd be happy to walk through in details in the scenarios that you need them for on that. Number 2 is if you procured the types of systems that were being assessed, often in the black world, of these little Coke cans that we called them, do you remember those days that we were going to throw out? And I don't know where that is today because it hasn't come across the street yet that I've seen, but I'd probably have missed it. That, you could live with below 40 submarines. You need to do some good things to these, the Tomahawk one, the SSBNs that are, we want to turn those all into SSGNs. And that's why we have to be careful on this talk that we're going to have here with the Russians. And eventually I met with Lyndon Brooks again the other day to go through where are we going in this whole area here, because he's a very thoughtful individual. We want to get the right number of SSGNs and all. But you'd have to procure, and that's what that 260 or really 240 number was based upon, you'd have to recur to these other systems, the Coke cans that are out there, linked to one another, you can sound it, and it all has to be brought out. And by the way, you'd still stay about 45